Episode 152 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, to a new episode of the greatest conference interpretation station channel on Earth. Brought to you live here from Sharm el Sheikh. Yes, I'm still here in Egypt at COP27. But despite the workload for the interpretations fans, I can always find time out to make a quick episode. And I hope you're on form today, this morning, whatever. You need to be in fine fettle. We have a very special episode lined up for you. We have a very special guest on our show, because today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be looking, well, if you have aspirations of working at the United Nations as an interpreter, this might be the episode for you to watch to, basically to learn how to take that path, what I's to dot, what T's to cross, etc. So I'm joined today. She's actually my former boss. She was my boss, I guess, for 2 or 3 years. I would say my favorite boss in my career in all jobs. There's not much competition. If you knew my previous bosses and things, there's not that much competition. She only scolded me. She only told me off once. That was good. That was when I binned a whole lot of NGO statements accidentally in the Human Rights Council. She was a bit peeved about that. That's the only time though she was angry with me. So even though she has stepped down now from being English booth chief, she very cunningly stepped down, I think, at the end of 2019. Her timing was really quite perfect. And anyone would think that she maybe had some inside knowledge of the coming COVID crisis. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was coincidence. But even though she has stepped back from the front lines to the back benches, she is still extremely active, in particular with all things to do with the exams. The exams, be it for the freelancers, be it for the competitive exam. What she doesn't know about the exams, the application process, what to prepare, how to prepare, probably isn't worth knowing. And she has very kindly agreed to appear on the show today. I feel like I've got exclusive broadcasting rights here. I feel very, very honored that she's agreed to do this on the interpretation station. So she is Rebecca Edgington. Rebecca, welcome to the interpretation station. How are you?
Thank you, Roland. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. So as Roland says, I was head of the English booth and I've been on staff at the United Nations for 18 years now. And I qualified as an interpreter in 1995. So I'll let you do the maths on that one. And for about 10 years, I've been involved in all of the English booth exams for freelance and staff interpreters. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And Roland's kindly agreed to let me have some time on the interpretation station so that I can help to guide all of those of you who'd like to work for the UN through the different exams that we have, because we just had a huge reform of the whole exam process, both for freelance and staff positions. And it's all gone online, partly due to COVID, but the move towards that started before COVID. And also there's different ways of applying now, and the exams are global. So they are valid for all of the duty stations now. So a lot of changes have happened recently.
Okay, so you say it's global. That's one thing actually I wanted to also ask. So what even though obviously Rebecca is the English booth, I'm from the English booth, I think what you're going to be telling us, Rebecca, is going to apply to exams across the booth, for all 6 languages, right? It's going to be the same process that's going to apply.
That's the idea, yes. Now everything's meant to be harmonized. We have global guidelines for all of the duty stations and regional commissions. And so you should be faced with pretty much the same system through all of the duty stations, through all the exams, and through all of the languages. So obviously there'll be a few differences for different booths in how they look at different things and how they organize exams, different language combinations. But the way of applying, which is what we're talking about today, should be the same.
And before we start, I mean, are there any, I suppose there's certain language booths, the exams are coming up pretty soon. I mean, I know the Arabic booth has recently held exams and the results have come in. What's coming up like in the next sort of year in 2023? Do you know? Are you at liberty to tell us?
I'm not totally at liberty to tell you, but I can say that there will definitely be English booth and French booth exams fairly soon. And I know that I think there's Chinese booth exams which are just being completed as well as the Arabic booth ones. So there might be a little bit of a hiatus before there's more exams for those two booths, but definitely for the English and French booths, they're coming up fairly soon.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to turn now to, how you should, what is the process? What should you do to basically get yourself, first of all, on the, how to get yourself a place on the actual exam, and then if you pass the exam, how would you proceed after that? So there's gonna be a lot of new acronyms. Some of these acronyms that are going to be popping up were new to me, so it might be just handy just to explain them before we go further. So we have these things called CELPs and GLRs, which I think are new. Back in my day, it was just the freelance exam and the competitive exam. So just tell us what's the difference between the GLR and the CELP.
Yes, we've got all this new jargon. So the competitive exam for staff interpreters used to be called the LCE, and now it's called the CELP. Yeah. So the competitive exam for language professionals. And then there's a GLR, which is a global language roster, which is the freelance roster. So the GLR exam is for freelance interpreters, people who want to freelance for the United Nations around the world. The exams can be joined together now. This is a new thing, which the Arabic booth just did and other booths will be doing, where you apply for one exam. So there's an advertisement which goes out, which is called a job opening. And you apply to this job opening, and it can qualify you either to be a staff member with the competitive level exam or to work freelance for the UN if you're not quite at that level. So this is a new thing. For the English booth, up until now, they've been separate exams still. So we have a GLR exam for the freelancers and a CELP exam for the potential staff members.
And will that now be merged? Is that the plan then?
It depends who you listen to. Okay. There's reforms still underway. The reforms haven't been finished yet, and that's under this discussion. But for the upcoming exams in English booth, they will still be separate.
Okay.
And so there will be separate job openings, as they're called. So there's a UN website, UN Careers website, and we'll share the address with you.
Well, maybe this would be a good thing. Maybe if we can share the screen to actually go there, and you can take us through a couple of these important sites. Okay, so with the wonders of modern technology, Rebecca has brought up the page. The first is I guess the first page that you should visit. This should be, I guess, your first stop. Careers. As you can see, she'll show careers.un.org. So Rebecca, tell us where should potential candidates go from here? What should they do from here?
Well, you go down to search job openings, and you leave all in just about every box. The only box that you want to change is a job network. Okay. And there you want to go into public information and conference management.
You see, that's the sort of thing you might not know if you you'd think you'd probably be looking for languages, right? You'd probably think, yes, okay, must have something to do with language. So I think that's very important. You know, public information and conference management. It's not exactly what might first spring to mind, unless you happen to know the UN system, because we are the Department of Conference Management, and then it would be obvious. But if you're from outside the UN, you want to make a note of that.
Yeah, and I played around with it, trying to put in different parameters, seeing if I could be more specific and search for interpreter anywhere or anything like that. And if I did that, I just couldn't find the information. Right. So, So what I have done is just put in job network, public information and conference management, and then do a search.
Okay.
And that way I'm not specifying any duty stations or anything. So you'll get a few more hits than you might do otherwise, but it does mean that you can see everything that's available.
There we go. I see an interpreter Russian down there, P4.
Yeah. So the
In
one that's
Vienna?
of interest here could be this one, 2023 competitive examination for language positions, French interpreters P2, P3. Yeah. So that is an advertisement for a competitive examination. So when we have the English booth one, it would read like that, but English interpreters, Chinese, Spanish, Russian, and so on. So this is what you're looking for. So you can then click on that and it will give you more information. So I'll give you the title, the job code, and
what happens if you click on that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that better?
Okay, there we go. So she's clicked on that job opening. So there you go.
So this is a job opening and you can read through it. You can see, as Roland said, we're the Department for General Assembly and Conference Management.
DGACM.
You can see the posting period.
Called.
The posting period is the period you can apply for. There it's a month that you have. If it is for a global language roster exam, so for freelance work, it's often only a week or 10 days.
Okay.
So that you need to be really aware of. So I'll talk later about how to set up alerts, how to register, set up alerts, and to be aware, made aware and ready to apply for any exams. So there you've got the different descriptions, the setting. So it doesn't say where it's going to be. It could be anywhere, any of the headquarters, New York, as in headquarters, New York, Geneva, Nairobi, or Vienna, and responsibilities. And then we got these things called competencies, which are what we are meant to be assessed by at the UN. Professionalism, teamwork, commitment to continuous learning. These will be the same for all language booths, for all positions. Then your education, your first level degree, and then your an interpretation qualification, or the equivalent, which is 150 days of work experience as a conference interpreter. Okay, so these are things that
that's what you need for work experience.
Yeah, if you don't have a master's, a BA or master's in interpretation.
Okay, so that's important, right? Because
yeah.
As I recall, back in the day when I applied, I didn't have any experience. I had an MA. So now you can actually get on it without the qualification, but if you've had the necessary experience behind you.
Yes. And so when you do your application, if you do not fit into the sort of rigid mold of a master's in interpretation into your mother tongue, which is the language the job is advertised for, then you need to make sure it's very clear in your cover letter how you're qualified as a French interpreter in this case, or as an English interpreter for the English exam. So where your languages come from and what languages you studied, because often your MA certificate isn't that clear on it. It just says you have a master's from somewhere. And if you don't have a master's, you need to be very clear as to what experience you have, what your background is, where your language experience comes from, and what your interpretation experience is.
Okay. Does that MA need to be specifically interpretation or not? Because when I did it, I didn't have a specific. I had an MA, but it wasn't specifically in interpretation.
So here, what it says is a first level university degree from a recognized school of interpretation, or a first level degree with then 150 days work. So it doesn't require masters here. And it doesn't specify. But when you're looking at all of the applications, when human resources first are looking at the applications, because they all go into human resources first, who do a first screening process. And if they see that you have no interpretation qualification and no experience, they could automatically exclude you straight off, and you don't even get looked at by the panel. So you need to make sure it's very clear in your application what experience you have, what qualifications you have.
This might seem a strange question, but is it a human being that actually sifts through those initial applications, or is it a machine? And because I've heard more and more in more places, it's like when there's a job, it's an artificial intelligence that just looks for the keywords, and if you haven't ticked all the right boxes, basically, it throws you out. But so is it still a human being that will review these?
A human being will review them, but the first screening is done automatically. So there are screening questions, which will be, do you have the education experience required to be eligible? Yes or no. And if you tick no to that, then you'll be automatically screened out by the
Okay,
computer.
I think that's
it.
because there was. I seem to recall there was somebody that was an excellent interpreter or whatever, but had answered one of those questions. He was maybe too honest on one of the questions, and just for doing that, for putting no, that was it. He was kicked out immediately the process, even though he was a great interpreter. Am I not right that that has happened?
That has happened in the past. And what has happened, if we find out about it, is that we can then go to human resources and ask them to release people. But that only works if you know one of our emails and can get somebody to go and do that. Or if you write directly to HR and say, oh, I haven't heard. But it's very difficult from outside the system because you don't know who to write to and you don't know what the deadlines are for things. So you don't know that the screening has finished unless you happen to know somebody who's been invited for the exam. And by the time that happens, normally it's too late. So the thing to do is, if in doubt, tick that you are qualified and trust in the panel to then go through it and say, oh, hang on a minute, this person doesn't have any university qualification at all. They're not qualified. Often people have different kinds of qualifications, like vocational qualifications, rather than strictly university qualifications, but they might still be valid. Yeah. And that's up to human resources together with the panel from the interpretation service to then look at that and assess it. So if in doubt, tick yes, I am qualified for this. If you really think that you are, or if you're in doubt, put yes. Because for those screening questions, if you put no to any of them, you will be automatically eliminated, and you won't have your file then reviewed by a human being who might say, okay, this person doesn't have an interpretation qualification and doesn't have 150 days as a conference interpreter, but does have the necessary work experience in the field of translation and verbatim reporting, plus some days as an interpreter, they are qualified. Okay. And so they, whereas you think, oh no, I don't have that experience as a conference interpreter, and you forget that there's other experience that can be counted too. So if in doubt, tick yes.
All right. So it's like on the customs declaration where if in doubt, tick no, I'm not carrying any firearms or illegal substances. But just tick yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. And you will, when you do your application, you'll need to upload all of your qualifications, all your university certificates, and you'll be writing a cover letter in which, as I said, you need to be very clear on your language combination and your qualifications. So that's where you say, okay, I didn't follow the traditional path, but I am qualified because, yeah. And you want to hear me interpret, you want to hear me do the technical interpretation exam. So then the languages, it'd always be the language of the advertisement. So French in this case. So that's a perfect command of that language, and then an excellent knowledge of the ones that they state here. Again, in your application, there will be a grid in it where you put in your languages, and then you have to assess your level in those languages for speaking, understanding orally, reading, and writing. We have had people, wonderful conference interpreters who are now our colleagues, who have been eliminated by the computer system or by human resources because they did not put that they were fluent at writing in Russian or Spanish.
Don't be modest, right?
You're being assessed. It means fluent by UN Secretariat standards, not by interpretation standards, but UN Secretariat. So that means that my Spanish, because I've done all of the UN courses in Spanish, in theory, my Spanish is fluent in all of those categories, but please don't ask me to ever prove it. As an interpreter, I would say it's not, and I don't work from Spanish, yeah. But so for all of your working languages, passive languages and active languages, put fluent in every category, yeah. Otherwise, you might be screened out automatically. HR might review it and screen you out, or the interpretation panel will understand, but it might not even get to the panel.
Okay, and you should be putting in languages other than as well, all not just the UN languages, or if you happen to be, I don't know, Portuguese or whatever, it's still worth putting in, yeah?
Yeah, and particularly if it is a UN language, but you don't yet work from it. You know, if you are applying for the job as a French interpreter and you already work from English and Russian, but you have a good knowledge of Spanish, you've been working on it for a few years, put in what your level is, even though you're not asking to be tested on it.
Okay.
Okay, and then the assessment.
One other thing I was going to just about the days, the 150 days. Is there any difference in the way they calculate those days? Because I know obviously the UN for certain things, I can't remember when it comes to pay grades and so on. The UN days work the UN count double to non-UN days. Does that play into this at all, or does it not matter?
Not at this stage.
Not at this stage.
At the actual recruitment stage, when you've passed these exams and you passed the staff exam and you've been given a job offer, you're being recruited, human resources will ask you for all of your experience again, and you need to keep a running total of all of your experience as a freelance interpreter. So you've got that ready, so that you've got your table of who you worked for, when, language combinations, and so that you can provide it at that point. And at that point, yes, human resources give greater weight to UN family work than they do to other work. But at this point, no, it doesn't matter if it's European Union, OSCE, private market, as long as it's conference interpretation. Yeah?
Okay, cool.
Okay, so in the job opening, it says assessment. So there you see what you need to do, the different stages of the process. So you will have to submit your application with a 250-word essay in French, in this case, for French interpreters. And so this explains why you want to work as an interpreter. And if you don't have this essay, you will not be considered. That's automatic elimination. So you do need to write something. It doesn't have to be right up to the word limit, but it does have to be more than just 2 lines. We've had people who've written just 2 lines and have been automatically excluded, yeah, even though they're fully qualified and eligible to sit the exam. And as I said, use that essay to say where your languages come from, what experience you have, and to explain that you tick all the boxes. Yeah. Okay. Then after that, you will be, if you're screened as eligible, first of all by the system, then by human resources, then by the interpretation panel, which we made up of senior interpreters at the different duty stations generally.
You're on that, right?
Yes. So for the English exams, I'm on that panel. And so we'll get the applications, we'll go through them, we'll just check that you meet the criteria and that, yes, we want to listen to you interpret. So then it's the technical part, which is the interpretation. And so there, sometimes there will be a pre-selection exam. That's what we will do for the freelance test, the global language roster exam in English Booth. We will have a pre-selection test. So if you've never applied to us before, so we don't know you, we will put you through this pre-selection exam, which is just one speech from French into English in simultaneous to do for us on the system vidCruiter, which we'll come to. And you'll do that. And it's just purely to assess, can you interpret or not? You know, do you have potential to interpret or not? It's assessed on a traffic light system. So red, oh my goodness, no, this person has no idea what simultaneous interpretation is, or this person is no way an A in English, their English is just not fluent. Or amber or green saying, yes, this person has potential. This person clearly has some interpreter training or interpreter experience. We want to hear more. So that's what's done in the pre-selection test. Here, there's not mention of a pre-selection test, I think. So
that was the first time they'd done that. Was it last year? That was the first time.
2 years. In the English Booth, we've done it each year so far.
And it's in French, right? It's in
only French.
Yeah,
only French, because that's the other working language of the UN Secretariat. And because it's also the relay language. So if you don't work from Russian, you'll take your Russian through the French booth in relay.
Yeah, yeah.
So you do need to have strong French. If somebody's speaking Arabic on the floor, it might well be a relay back into French. So you need to have good, solid French throughout the UN Secretariat. So that's why we do it with French as the eliminatory language. It's also the one that everybody has in common.
That's the one everyone, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody has to have French for the English booth. Everybody has to have English for the French booth.
Do you happen to know for like the Arabic booth? Because obviously, do they have to? Is it like English? Is that pre-selection? Is it like English to Arabic, or do you know?
I believe they didn't do a pre-selection. They went straight into the exam. I'm not sure about that, but the Chinese and Arabic booths, you can do it just with French or just with English.
Okay.
Yeah. And but that you just need to look at the job opening. Job openings will be different as well. Last time we had a competitive exam in the English booth, it was only for French and Russian. It wasn't for Spanish, interpreters who work from Spanish. The one which should be held next year would be for all language combinations, for French and Russian, French and Spanish, or French, Russian, and Spanish. Okay. So as you go down, you see that it explains simultaneous interpretation of 3 speeches. So this is a competitive exam for staff interpreters, the CELP. There is 3 speeches. For the freelance exam, it's 2 speeches.
Okay. As it's always been. That's been the...
Yeah. 8 to 10 minutes. This is all done online nowadays. So this is part of the big reform process and accelerated by COVID. Is that it is all done on an online platform called VidCruiter. This is proctored, so it's sort of invigilated by you being recorded during the process, which is a bit unfortunate because you get to look at yourself whilst you're interpreting, though we've been working on changing that. But it does mean that we can check that you've not got anybody whispering you answers, that you've not got any, you're not using any other resources. So that's why it's video recorded. The videos are only seen by the administrator. They're not seen by the grading panel at all because the exams are meant to be anonymous. Yeah.
Okay.
And you will be able to have a good chance to practice with the VidCruiter system. You will be sent a mock exam, a technical test that you can do before. I'm trying to find a bit on that. Oh, there we go. 2 weeks before the online part 1, all convoked candidates will have an opportunity to ensure their equipment and internet connection are acceptable and complete a mandatory mock test that will not be graded. Now,
just highlight that, yeah.
Yeah. So that means that you can.
There it is. Anyway, it's fine. That's the important bit, right?
Okay, so this is saying that 2 weeks before the exam, the first part of the exam, whatever it is, pre-selection or the actual exam, if there's no pre-selection, you will be sent a mock test. So you can check your equipment, you can check the internet connection, and you can familiarize yourself with this new VidCruiter online platform.
Okay.
You can do the mock test up to 10 times. And I really recommend that you start doing it early. We have had people who left it right till the end of right up to the deadline, because you have to complete it at a certain time before the exam. It might be 48 hours, it might be 24 hours, whatever the deadline is. You have to complete it. We have had people who, because of time zone differences, failed to complete it on time and were then excluded. And that's just tragic. We don't want to see that. So also, we've had people who have discovered that there was something wrong with their equipment and they couldn't complete it, but they'd done it the day before the deadline and it was a Sunday and they couldn't then replace their equipment in time to do the mock test successfully. So please try and do it straight away. Nobody listens to it. Nobody marks it. It is purely for you, okay, to check your equipment, to check it all works. It gives you a chance to go through the whole process, checking your sound, checking your equipment, checking you can upload and download things. So it really is a vital part of the process for you to reassure yourself that you know what you're doing, that you're familiar with the setup before the day of the exam. And like I said, you can do it up to 10 times. You can also stop it at some point. You start it and you realize that you're not comfortable, you're not happy. You just stop and then you do it again later. Okay.
Tell me, does everyone everywhere sit the exam at the same time?
Yes. They do.
So I guess that might cause some slight logistical problems if you happen to live in a far off part of the
Yes,
world
and
somewhere.
we have had situations where we've had, well, in the English booth we have to balance people from Asia and
Yeah.
from the west coast of America. So yeah, you might be getting up very early, you might be going to bed very late, but we try to do our best to do that. Generally, they're set at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon Geneva time,
Okay.
as that seems to work quite well for the
Covers.
different time
Yeah.
zones.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. But we try to balance it.
Okay.
Obviously, yeah, it will depend where you are. The mock test you can choose, you can do any time, but do keep an eye on the deadline. Please don't leave it to the last minute. It's nerve-wracking for everybody. Okay, so for the exams, so for the Global Language Roster freelance exams, it's a very similar job opening advert, but it is for not competitive exam in the posting title, but Global Language Roster examination.
Okay.
Now, if you apply for a competitive examination, but you and you are not quite at the standard, you can still be put on the global language roster for freelance work from the competitive exam. So it's good
So
to
you
know.
wouldn't have to do it a second time, basically.
No.
You could. Okay.
So it's good to know. And if the only advert you see is for a competitive exam, it may well be that the language booth is only doing the competitive, and they're also going to use it to assess for the global language roster. So they're going to do one exam for both freelance and competitive. Yeah. So it depends on the booth, and if in doubt, apply.
Okay. Even if you only want the freelance, but it's only the competitive that's up, nevertheless you want to still apply, right?
Yes, that would be my advice. And
Okay.
get the experience, and then find out as you go through. As soon as you're sent the mock test, you should get an email from an administrator who is a UN staff member, who will then be communicating with you. Yeah. So then it should be clear exactly what is involved, and they will explain to you if it's for both global language roster and competitive examination purposes. Yeah.
So is there anything else on that page that you want to look at, or?
Just that at the end, if you're successful in the interpretation exams, you are then invited to a competency-based interview. Let me scroll to the competencies.
Okay.
Now, for those of you who don't know a competency-based interview, it is a peculiar beast. It's an interview where you are asked about
The
your past
CBI, right? The
experience.
famous. That's
Yeah,
another
the
thing. Yeah, if
CBI.
you hear people talking about the CBI, that's what it is. The competency-based interview.
So CBI will have you questioned on these three competencies: professionalism, teamwork, and commitment to continuous learning. And you'll be asked about your past experience as an indicator of how you would react in the future. So I won't say, Roland, if you were assigned to be team leader, and they asked for an extension to a meeting, how would you go about organizing that? I would instead say, Roland, can you give us an example of when you've been working in a team and you've been asked to go the extra mile and what happened?
Okay, so they want actual things that have happened as opposed to hypothetical things that might happen. Okay.
Yeah. And they don't have to be from interpreting, because you can apply for this exam with 0 days of interpretation work. So it can be, you can give examples of when you were a scout, when you were planning a holiday with friends, or when you're working in a club, when you were in an orchestra, anything, because we cannot expect you to have interpretation experience. Obviously, it's good if you do have some examples from the interpretation world, either from your training or from volunteer work or from paid work. But if you don't let that stop you. Give examples from other things you've done in your life,
So you
either
may want to
professional examples or not.
you may want to prepare concrete examples for each of those three categories, right? Before you go in, have something specific under each
Absolutely.
category.
Read the description of the competencies carefully, and make sure you have examples to demonstrate these. They will be open-ended questions so that you can just speak. If you get an unexpected question, you find yourself drying up, just ask them to rephrase it. You know, it's a friendly process. It's meant to draw out the best in you. And if you do get to that stage, prepare. It is a peculiar kind of interview. Do prepare for it. The UN Careers website has lots of example questions and also shows you information on how it's marked. So the different indicators that the interview panel are going to be checking you against. Okay.
Is it possible to fail the interview? Is it possible to pass the
Yes.
test and fail the interview?
It is. It's rare though. It is rare,
Okay.
but it is possible, and it might depend on how you are. I mean, if you come into the interview and say, well, look, actually, I don't want a job at all. I just thought I'd chance my arm, and I don't actually want to work for the UN. I just wanted to be on the freelance roster.
Very well, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't come across very well, and you might fail that part. You might still be on the freelance roster, but yeah, but that's it. So yes. So that's it. That's it on this page. Yeah, I will stop sharing.
Okay. So another thing that Rebecca was going to tell us about also was how to get the job alerts as and when they come up. So how should the potential candidates do that?
So on that same UN Careers webpage, before you find your job opening, you can also see that you can set up notifications.
Can we bring the page up again, perhaps? So job alerts, right.
So to be prepared for when job openings are put up, particularly because they're not necessarily up for very long, it's best to register online on the UN Careers webpage and to set up job alerts. So we scroll down to the bottom of this page now, and you can see here to receive job alerts, you have to register as a user. And then once you're logged into the system, you can set up your job search and save the criteria for a job alert. So I really recommend that you do that, because then you will be automatically notified whenever there's an interpretation exam which is advertised. That also means that you can set up your profile, which I really recommend you do in advance, calmly, because you have to fill in a whole long form called a PHP, a personal history profile, which is a UN CV. And in that, you have to put in all your education, and it's not the easiest form in the world to fill in. There's a lot of drop-down menus which don't quite correspond to your own experience and things, and it's good to set that up in advance. And you can also upload all of your certificates as well in advance so that you're ready to go. And if you're traveling or something when there's a job opening advertised, you can just quickly update it and then send it.
Could you perhaps just go in, just click on that, just so they can see what that will take you to?
Okay, so if we take this down, so you've registered, you set up your passwords, there you go, and you register there. So it's quite simple registration, and then you'll have your Inspira, as it's called, login, and you can set up a draft job application.
So once you set up your account and then you filled in your PHP, you will get your account will look something along these lines. It's called it's Inspira. So you can see there's a short video there for 4 minutes 22, a candidate application in Inspira that should give you a bit more details. So what would they do here then, Rebecca? Now, what should they fill in from this page? What's worth noting?
There's two parts. There's a job search for job openings again from here, but there's also my applications. So what you would want to do when you've registered is to go in and to set up a draft application. So you can go to create an application and click on that. And you can do it without any job openings. So you would do it for no job here, and then you can copy it afterwards. So you build a new application, creating it from scratch.
Okay, so you don't have to go through the whole laborious process over and over again for every new job.
Yeah, once you set it up, and then when you have a job opening, yeah, you can just use it from there. And you can use a template here to create your application offline and then upload it. So there's let's see what that template looks like. Okay. So this is an offline application to do. So this is where you would be able to fill it in offline and then upload it afterwards. Otherwise, you can fill it in online and save it at any point. And then you've got your draft ready, so you can add in your educational details, your work experience, your languages. So here you can see the infamous language table, where you need to put in fluent if you are an interpreter.
Okay. What does it choose? So just on the drop down menus, just click on one of the drop down menus there. Basic,
So
confident,
basic,
fluent, fluent, right?
Yeah. Don't just say confident, even if you don't like writing in Russian, put fluent if you're an interpreter who works from Russian.
Okay. And what's past LPE there? Mother tongue, and then next to it there's a language proficiency exam, is that?
Yeah, that's a language proficiency exam. Okay. So that's UN staff and also the freelancers who work for us may be able to do the courses at the different UN duty stations offered by the UN and would then pass the United Nations language proficiency exam. Okay. So you only tick that if you've got it. And it does say how acquired formal education, informally mother tongue, doesn't really matter on that. The important thing is that you put in that you are fluent in each of these 4 categories.
And I get, what about, so obviously I know that with if in the English booth, French booth as well, for Russian, Russisant, okay, there's you tend to get quite a few what we call heritage speakers applying, the double mother tongue, Russian and English, say. So they should, I mean, they should just put mother tongue, right? They shouldn't be again.
Yes. If they should be able to put mother tongue twice. Yeah, you can.
Okay, right. That's important, I think, right.
Yeah. So you can have 2 mother tongues. That's absolutely fine.
Okay, right.
Okay, so that's the language box. You will need references, 2, I believe. 3. Yeah, 3 references. And you can prepare the cover letter in advance. And yeah, skills and training are mainly well, UN at the top and then non-UN. Don't need to worry too much about that for interpreter positions. The most important is language, work experience. Try not to leave gaps in this. HR don't like too many big gaps. Try and fit it in. If you're self-employed, you're self-employed, yeah, and try and make that work. Education, you will find that sometimes it's difficult to find on drop-down menus exactly what your degree is, but now it looks like they have improved it a bit so that you can add in different things, but they don't have languages, you see there.
Yes, okay.
So what you need to put in humanities, maybe. I think I put in humanities when I applied way back when. So it's just one of those quirks. Just do your best and put in the closest thing you can find. So humanities is a bit of a catch-all for linguists, yeah. But that you need to know, because otherwise you can get blocked on it and not finish it, and then you're yeah. So that's main course of study and field of study, yeah. And you're going to be uploading your certificates anyway, so you can, people can check that, and HR can check. They can search for the exact title in the original language and things, and find it. Okay, so there is a lot of help on Inspira to help you fill this in. A lot of advice.
Okay.
As well.
Okay, so that's all to do with basically your PHP, your personal history profile.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want on that subject you want to mention, Rebecca?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it. Those are the main things, the main problems that people have in their applications, I think. So I think that's it. And then yeah, we could do the DGACM website, which just gives some practical information and some examples of past exams.
Okay, so this is another page here. Can you see that, Rebecca?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so this I'm going to put, by the way, all these websites. I will be putting them all down in the description box underneath the video. Okay, so this one is un.org, DGACM, in content exams interpreters. Okay, so this is, I know this guy. It's Yura, a former colleague. He's in the Russian booth in in New York. Okay, so what do we want to know from here? What's handy for them to potential candidates to know on this page?
Exams for interpreters and
Okay,
examination
so if we
announcements. We do the
click
exams for
here,
interpreters. Yep. So this is a little bit outdated. It's not taken account
exams for
of the
interpreters. Okay, recruitment process.
recent about the recent developments of it all being online and so on, but it does give you some extra information and about how to apply, and it gives you information about the competency-based interview if you're doing the competitive exam for staff interpreters. And it does tell you a bit about what we expect to see when grading the exam. It says that each speech is approximately 5 to 10 minutes long in exam. I'd say a bit longer. They're normally we say 7 to 8 as a minimum, just so you know. We are also testing stamina a bit, so that is part of it. And so the competitive there, they've got competitive examinations in main languages. I believe that there's some examples of former exams somewhere, if we can find them. If you go up to the competitive examination and click on that, maybe.
Where was
it was down below the picture. Down below the
okay.
I think.
Competitive. Okay, here. All right.
Yeah, I think.
Let's see where this will take us to.
Oh no, that takes you to Spira. That's no good. But that does explain more. That does explain more about what the exams are.
I remember in the old days, like there was a link you could get a sort of example of a speech that you might get an exam. I seem to remember they had like a 4-minute clip from a typical exam speech.
Yeah.
If you need typical exam speech, you know where you can find them. You just come to the interpretation station.
Yes, if in doubt.
If in doubt,
do everything on the interpretation station.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bit of a plug. Examination announcements. Do you say that was worth having a look at?
Let's have a look.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so this was for competitive exams. I clicked exam announcements.
There we go. There's a global language roster. Look.
There you go. Global language roster exam for Russian interpreters.
Competitive exam for Arabic and Chinese
Some of
interpreters.
these the deadline has passed. A lot of these are sort of going back. So is there anything currently open?
It doesn't have the French interpreters exam yet, which has just been
not yet,
advertised.
It seems. Okay, I guess it takes a little bit of time for them to upload that. Okay. One thing I was going to ask. So, in the exam, is it only going to be UN statements from the UN?
Again,
that speeches from outside.
That will depend on different booths, but it can be speeches from outside. Yes.
Okay.
It can be speeches from outside the UN. The important thing is to have material that provides the typical challenges that we encounter as conference interpreters at a setting like the UN. So it wouldn't necessarily be just from the UN.
Okay, so it could be like the EU in theory, right? In theory. It
could be, but you have to bear in mind the fact that we don't want to inadvertently give candidates a speech they've actually already interpreted. Maybe somebody's already freelancing at EU, but they haven't yet taken the UN exam, and they come along and we give them a speech that they were assigned to interpret, because it's quite difficult for us to check that. So I'd say that would be unusual.
Okay. So what's the best thing that your candidates can do to prepare?
You mean apart from go on the interpretation station?
I didn't say it, did I?
Obviously, you go on the interpretation station. The best thing you can do is to look for past exams, if possible, to do the mock test early when you come to that point when you've been accepted to do the exam. In the meantime, go on the different UN websites, look at what's on UN Web TV, make sure that you know the structure of the UN, so that if we say this is a speech delivered, there'll be an introduction to each speech. And if we say in that, this is a speech delivered at the first committee in New York, that you're not panicking about what the first committee does, that you're straight away engaging your brain and you're recognizing it. That if we say this is about a peacekeeping mission in a country, you already know the acronym for the peacekeeping mission, or you recognize it when it comes up. That will just help you be calm and do your best and be focused during the exam. So I'd say look at the UN structure, look at the different activities of the UN, and then go on UN Web TV, go on the different UN websites.
All the
and
ones I take my statements from. Okay, guys. So this is like all the stuff I quote. I always put in, the link to the it's conf.org, all these statements from Geneva that I regularly link to. And it's maybe a good point just to remind you. So I've done a couple of previous episodes very recently, like preparing yourself to work in Geneva. I think it was episode 142. So I'll put the link up to that. Okay. That sort of just shows you all the different places you should visit to find statements. And then I did one for New York as well, maybe episode 144 or something, put a link up there. So I think I did quite a good job on them. So I think there's quite a lot of info there to look at as well.
Yeah, that's great. And remember that there is also Vienna and Nairobi as headquarters, and the exam
Don't
is valid
ignore
for those.
them, right?
So don't ignore them. And to particularly know the structures of the UN, the kind of topics, obviously it's very wide, broad-ranging topics, but the core topics of the UN and the register. The register is always important. You're not going to be, businessmen chatting over a beer. It is going to be high-level register, diplomats, ambassadors, ministers, that kind of register for the most part.
Okay. Now, how's it going to be graded?
Yeah, so we have a fairly new scoring rubric. This is certainly what is being used at the moment. As I said, we are in reform period, so I don't know how long this will be valid for, but it's basically the same kind of thing anyway.
Shall I bring it up? Ladies and gentlemen, please don't adjust your TV sets. Everything is normal. Just bear with us. Now, the thing is, when me and Rebecca filmed this 2 days ago, we had a slight technical glitch and we lost the last 15, 20 minutes of the episode. So we're refilming things now, more or less in the same environment as before. You'll notice I've actually had a shave. Rebecca's actually now in the booth, I think, at work. But as I said, we're going to refilm what we did 2 days ago. However, in the intervening 2 days, there has been a change in the facts on the ground, as they like to say at the UN, because just yesterday, so today is the 17th of November, yesterday, the 16th of November, the UN actually put up its official announcement of the new freelance exam, the GL, what do we call it now? The GLR for the English booth. So if you're watching the episode now and you plan to take the exam for the English booth coming up, you need to act very fast because the application deadline is, correct me if I'm wrong, 28th of November or 24th?
It's been brought forward by HR when they published it. So it's the 24th now.
24th of November, 2022. Okay, so if you're in the English booth and you want to do the English booth exam, watch this episode now and then just immediately get your application away. So the thing we were going to look at, we're going to just start then by looking at how the exam is actually marked. So Rebecca is a bit of an expert on this issue, so she's going to give you a bit of an idea of exactly how they grade your performance. So Rebecca, please do explain.
Thanks, Roland, and thanks for being so gallant and not saying it was all my fault for losing the recording, but it was. So we've been caught a little bit by surprise that they published the advertisement for the freelance, the GLR exam a little bit early for the English booth, but that does mean that there's a French competitive exam and an English booth freelance exam, which are both open for applications now. So we hope that this will help you get your applications in with less stress and less sweat than usual. So for the grading, for what you're aiming at, we look at 3 categories when we are grading. We have a scoring rubric, and in it we look at delivery. So the quality of your voice, if it's smooth, if it inspires confidence, if there's any tics, verbal tics that you have, heavy breathing, that kind of thing. And then we look at accuracy. Of course, that's absolutely vital. And then target language. So ease with the language. And if you're recasting, if you're reformulating, if it sounds really English, if you're working into English, or really French, if you're working into French. So those are the 3 categories. For the GLR, for freelance work, you need to achieve 50% in each of those categories for each speech. And for the competitive exam, it's 70% at the moment. Again, there's a reform ongoing, but that's how it stands today. And on it, there's also the fact you can have a red flag. So one thing that can happen is if somebody hears the introduction and they think, oh my goodness, what a nightmare topic, I'm not ready for this, and they don't realize that they're already recording, and they swear on the microphone, express their feelings quite quite emphatically. That has happened, and that can be a red flag.
No potty language. No, we don't want any
No
potty
potty
language.
yeah, no thanks. So try and keep your calm and your composure, whatever you're thinking inside, and remember your camera and your microphone are on before the recording even starts. So before the speech starts, during the intro, your recording is still on. Okay, so that's on the grading, and then we're going to say, so that's then marked by a panel from across all duty stations, because it's a global roster now for both exams. And the panel will then confirm the results together. And for the competitive exam, you're then invited to interview, and that's the CBI interview, competency-based interview.
Yeah.
So if I share the job opening now,
okay,
this just gone up for the English booth,
Let's have a
and
look at that.
You can see from this.
Okay, we can see it. Right, there we go.
So I'll go down and take you to the competencies. Here we go.
24th of November. So it's the 20. So is that right? I saw at the top there, the 24th of November is the deadline. Back. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, they published it a few days early. So everything shifted back. So yeah. Here, so you've got just the same as the French one you can see, but that was for the competitive exam. Yeah. So this is now one for the global language roster. You can see the title, English Interpreters Global Language Roster. So that means for freelance work, multiple duty stations. So it's global. Okay. So then you can see the competencies, professionalism, communication, teamwork.
So those are the ones you need to think of your concrete examples. Those
not for the freelance exam, because we won't be doing it. We won't be doing a CBI for the freelance exam. Okay. Not for this time, not for the English booth. Again, that might be part of the reform for other booths in the future. But for the competitive exam, we would do an interview based on those. And there's a lot of information and sample questions on the UN Careers website. So just look up CBI and you'll see lots of sample questions. It's got the work experience here. So minimum of 50 proven days working conference interpretation is required only in the absence of a formal university qualification in conference interpretation. So if you've got a BA or MA in conference interpretation, you don't need any experience at all. If you don't, then you need 50 days of experience. Languages,
this is just different a reminder, from the competitive, right? How many? It was a minimum of how many for the competitive? It was 100, I think 120 or something, was it? Or 100,
was it 150?
Anyway, it was earlier on in the show. You'd have seen it. Rewind, you'll see exactly.
Yeah, it was, but it was definitely
more. Compare it to that French one we were showing earlier, because that French one was for the competitive, right?
Yes, absolutely. Right. And they are pretty standard templates, which are then just tweaked for the language booth that you're applying for. So it would be similar requirements for all of the language booths. Then the languages here, just as I look at it, just a reminder, when you do your application, say you are fluent, please say you're fluent in all of them. Say that you're fluent in writing Russian, even if you never write in Russian anymore, not since your degree, okay? And then your cover letter, again, that is important. Don't forget about it. Don't think it's not important. It is. That's where you tell us, yes, this is why I'm qualified for the job, okay? And often we don't get much information in the university transcripts and things that you upload, or in the university certificates. So just make sure that you say, yes, I am qualified into English because, and then you'll have your test. So your technical test, we talk about the mock test, then a pre-selection test for the GLR exam. We do have a pre-selection test because we will have people applying with no experience at all, or who are not actually qualified, or maybe not particularly English booth. So we do a pre-selection test, just one speech, 7 or 8 minutes speech in French to be interpreted into English. And that is assessed on a yes-no basis, pass-fail basis. Yes, we want to listen to more of what this person can do, or no, this person really isn't qualified or really isn't ready yet to be tested for UN work. And then once you've passed that, you're invited to the final test. So that's going to be on the 31st of January. And that will be the simultaneous interpretation of 2 speeches from French. And then if you are also presenting Russian or Spanish, from those languages. Okay.
Right.
And then the panel will evaluate, and you'll be told if you pass or not.
So there you go. That's how you have. That's how you apply. Now, just like to wrap up, just a few quick questions for you, Rebecca, that I know people always wonder about and they've asked me about. When taking the test, there was talk of them introducing a 3 strikes and out policy, that if you failed the exam 3 times, that would be your lot basically, and which perhaps deters some people. The possibility of that was perhaps deterring some people from applying because they thought they don't want to waste, the 3 strikes if they're clearly in a position where they're maybe not quite ready. But so can you just confirm that 3 strikes and policy that doesn't yet, it's not happening as far as we know, right?
It's not happening at the moment. Like I said before in this program, I had to be a little bit careful because there's a big reform underway globally. Chief interpreters are discussing final points of it. At the moment, there is no 3 strikes and you're out policy. Okay. And we decided when we went online, when we were forced to go online for the exams, to have them over VidCruiter through this platform, we decided that it was a big change for everybody and that we should start from 0. And so records have been kept, careful records have been kept since we went online. And I don't know if it will change at some point that there will be a 3 strikes and you're out policy. But at the moment, there is not one.
Okay, so don't feel nervous. Just apply. Just do it. Seriously. I mean, now since the situation is like that, just do it. Get the experience. That's even if you're going to fail, just get the experience so that when you go next time, at least know how the exam feels like. Okay, so just take this opportunity now when there are no strikes going to be against you. Just take the exam, see how you do.
That's what I'm saying to people. That's my advice, is at the moment, just go for it, give it a go. And then you also know much better how to prepare for when you are ready, and how to get yourself in a position you're ready. Because if you don't know what you're aiming at, it's very difficult to prepare. And then you will familiarize yourself with VidCruiter, with the platform that we use, with the whole process. You'll receive more information in the candidate application pack. You'll know then what you're aiming at. And what often happens is that recent graduates will sit the freelance test, the GLR, and they will fail it. But they will learn from it and say, okay, I'm going to need a year of intensive practice, lots of volunteer work or whatever, or I'm going to need a couple of years. And then they come back when they are ready and they pass it the second time. Right. So really, we've seen that quite a lot. So people need to know what it's all about. It is a particular kind of test. It's different from the EU tests. It's different from the other tests you do in the academic tests. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you pass, okay, there was a question. How many times can you say no? Because presumably if you pass, there's a good chance that Antonio Gutierrez is going to knock on your door and say, could you come and work for us, please? Would you like a contract? Now, can you say no to Antonio? No to Antonio.
I think if he turns up on your doorstep, with your UN badge ready, I don't think you should say no. For the global language roster, as a freelancer, you're just on it. That's it. Right. You're on it, so that's not an issue. For the competitive exam, there is a 2 offers and then you're off the roster rule. So if you are given 2 formal offers of employment, so that means an email from Human Resources, from the duty station that's offering the job. If you are offered twice by Human Resources, so not an informal call from the chief interpreter or the head of booth, but an actual formal email from Human Resources, and you reject it twice because it's not the duty stations you want to go to, or you're not ready for a staff job at that point for personal reasons, whatever, then yes, you're off the roster for a staff position and you have to sit the competitive exam again if in the future you would want a job. Even if you've passed the first time, right? Yeah. We really try not to let that happen. If somebody's already refused an offer, then the chief interpreters and heads of booth will try very hard not to have a formal offer go. But it does happen that there's empty positions at more than one duty station, and HR have to do due diligence. They have to offer to people on the roster. So that can happen. But again, it would be very rare. Okay, so just worth bearing in mind, Yeah, basically, if you've passed a competitive exam, we want you to work for us. So we don't want to take you off the roster, but sometimes it is out of our hands with HR. Yeah.
Okay. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, I guess, if it comes
Yeah.
knocking. And one last question. So people often ask about feedback after the exam. You know, people who maybe, well, yeah, people want to know how they did and what they got wrong, what they got right. Is there any chance they're going to get any feedback after the exam?
The formal answer is no. And from the competitive exam, it's certainly no. That was a decision, again, taken at a higher level in human resources. We run the competitive exams together with human resources, with the exam section. And so there's a lot of different, very stringent requirements there. So no. From the freelancer GLR exam, the first one we did in the English booth, in fact, first and second, we did give feedback, but that has changed now. That was with the switch to the new system. We felt it was really good to give feedback and to get feedback ourselves on the exam with the switch. But it's not actually that useful for candidates. I know candidates want it, and I know they think it's useful, but you know yourself what you've done in an exam. And what we are evaluating is the final product. So we're guessing at why it's not what we're looking for. It's sometimes it's easy to say, but most of the time it's not, and it is just a guess. And so it's not necessarily that helpful. So it is an evaluation on the final product rather than an assessment for constructive criticism to be given for feedback. Also, the volume of candidates we have for a freelance exam or competitive in some booths as well, but certainly for freelance exam, is really high. And we want to mark it properly and really well, but you do take different notes and mark differently if you're going to give feedback as well. So so I think the general answer is no, don't expect feedback from the exams. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds fair enough. Is there anything final thing you want to add, Rebecca?
No, just please do remember to put in that you're fluent, whatever. You are in touch with Roland clearly through the interpretation station. So watch this again, go on the careers website, have a look. If the exam for your booth isn't advertised at the moment, go on, set up your profile and get ready for it. Because as we've seen with the English freelance test now, the application periods are really short.
Yeah. And if there's any other sensible questions that you've got, put them in the comment section down below, and me and Rebecca will try and give an answer. So if there's anything that we've left out, so put it in the comments. Well, that I think that's been really helpful for everyone. Rebecca, thank you very much for taking the time out to be with us. Very much enjoyed having you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
A pleasure. Hopefully you'll come back. Maybe do an episode for German. We haven't had a German episode yet on the interpretation station. So if ever you feel like sprechening a bit of Deutsch, you can come on and do one. Guys, right, I hope you find that helpful. Please do like, share, comment, and subscribe as usual. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's basically bye-bye from me. Bye-bye from Rebecca.
Bye-bye from me.
And all that remains to be said is that episode 152 of the interpretation station stands adjourned.